I'm going to say a few words about this current exhibition I'm having at Arthur Roger Gallery in New Orleans. It's not often that I get a chance to have an exhibition that I can verbally talk about in ways that people who see the show normally wouldn't get to hear, because the interaction between your paintings and others is such a personal thing between the viewer and the painting itself that sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not, for the artist to explain what they were doing and why they were doing it. Rather than talk about so much the content, I'd like to start by just saying some things about the technical approach, because I feel like that I'm an artist who's a throwback to a previous time in the business of making visual images. I feel that I came very much out of the 19th century and earlier in terms of my style of painting. My influences have always been artists from the late 1800s, early 1900s, American painters that influenced me are people like Winslow Homer, Frederick Church, great American landscape painters. And some of my greatest influences have been, of course, the great Goya, this great Spanish painter Goya, and the great British landscape painter Turner. But I have a great affinity for artists who paint in a very emotional and a very kind of hands-on, painterly style.
I don't perceive myself as a political artist, per se. I'm concerned with social issues that, of course, overlaps with political issues. I'm more concerned with humanity. My preoccupation is primarily with the victim. That's usually the theme of my work, you know.
Whereas Golub, he's...
Like, for example, Golub or Succo or some other artists, they deal with the aggressor and also the victim, and they point the finger at the aggressor. I don't do that in my work, because usually I don't know who the aggressor is. But I know who the victim is, which are all of us, potential victims.
And you also, in your work, tend to personalize the victim as usually always being yourself, right?
Right. Well, in 1978, I began to do self-portraits, sort of like analytical self-portraits, looking at myself in the mirror and using Prismacolor pencils. In 1980, I began then to do, from memory, I began to work doing self-portraits. The idea of the self-portrait is not to use it as a narcissist way of portraying myself, embellishing myself. On the contrary, I use it as a vehicle to convey different conditions, different situations, and usually as a victim. Where, for example, on top of my head something might be happening, or inside of myself. By that I mean the body becomes like a chamber of horror of a certain degree. Okay, in this space here, I use it primarily to, when I'm going to have a show, I set up the works on this space here that allows me to think more or less how the show is going to look in a gallery or museum. So my working area is back there. That's where I work. But once I finish certain works, I put them here. By the way, this is the area where I do my paintings and do my work. But this is primarily my workbench where I do the paintings. Primarily here when I open that door to get some light and feel like I'm not really in a bunker completely, you know, feeling totally enclosed. So I like to work in here, and this is some of the paintings that I've done this year, part of this series. That one is titled Evacuees, and this one is titled Race, which have to do with the fairgrounds. I like to, when the season starts of the horse racing, I like to go there once a week. It's sort of like a nice break for me to get away from the studio.
Greetings, I'm Richard Baker, coming to you from Cambridge, Massachusetts. This is a photo of my studio in Somerville that I just moved into in September of 2019. Here I am at the top of the ladder, having just unpacked my downsized library, having just moved from New York. Many years ago, I featured books in various still life paintings. And then in 2004, I began doing full-on portraits of primarily paperback books. Here is my home studio in the kitchen that I've been working at for the past 2 months or God knows how long. About a year and a half or more ago, I conceived of a show specifically for Arthur Roger Gallery in New Orleans. It's a show entirely of paintings of cookbooks.
The oil spill was the reason for this group. I think it was that, and the fact that I come down here and see it all the time. I mean, a lot of times I'll go see a subject a bunch of times before I start painting it. I'll just be around it and see people and meet them, and then something will click and make me want to, try to do some more with it. And that's what the catalyst was. I can't even go on a trip. I can't go do anything where that doesn't happen. I'm just constantly feeling guilty for not drawing or doing something to do with what I'm seeing, because there's always something. This morning it was rainy. It's February. It has a certain look outside, and I was in the thing eating breakfast thinking, I should be noting this. I know I'm down here to do something else, but I should be noting this situation. So yeah, I'm always seeing people, and like the portraits, I'll go fishing with some guy who does not want to have his portrait painted, I'm pretty sure. I don't tell anybody that I'm an artist or anything, I'm just fishing. And which is true, but I look at the people and in conversation and when we're doing our bit, and that's where that comes from. But they get their portraits painted and they don't ever know what happened. And that's the beauty of it for me, because I can go for the strength, trying to make a good painting and not trying to make a good likeness.
My name is Jacqueline Bishop, and we are in my studio today in New Orleans, inner city New Orleans. And I've been working in this studio for about 27 years. And it is the place where I come 7 days a week, several hours a day for those 27 years. But I am basically a painter, and I love the whole act of painting, and I do a lot of collage, installation, and assemblage work in this space all these years. I'm very interested in landscape issues and the whole idea of landscape, the politics behind it, the poetry behind it, and I'm also interested in landscape painting itself, the art historical references to landscape painting, the whole act of painting landscape 200 years ago, the fact that landscape is even on cave walls, which is the beginning of ecology. So for me, I really believe that ecology is culture. Culture comes from the landscape, and I think my work is entrenched in that type of philosophy. It's kind of liberating to work big again, because I try to do a big painting like every 6 years. Because I normally work small. I like working intimate and scale. So I learned so much from a big painting, and go back into the little painting, and then go back into a big painting if I can. So it's just, they feed off of each other for me. It's from the Nest series, kind of a nest. I first started doing the baby shoes several years ago when I was collecting them in the streets of New Orleans and Boston and parts of South America. It was amazing how many baby shoes there are out in the streets. And I started painting landscapes on them. I consider them paintings. The Tacuna Indians in the Amazon carve these, and I support them by buying them from them. They are a tribe that is stuck between cultures, and this is their way of making a living, and then I use these as books. This is a collage that takes several days to do, and I consider this a landscape. And from here, this will become a print, and I will do an etching over the collage. And we start with the collage first, and then we do the drawing. I do the drawing, which goes over this, and it's incomplete. I'm going to be covering this with images which are similar to the dark organism series that I've been working on for about 10 years.
I was raised in a rural South Louisiana environment about 25 miles from Baton Rouge. I was educated, except for 3 years in public school, in Catholic parochial schools. And Catholicism, especially the imagery of pre-Vatican Council II Catholicism, had a big influence on the way I saw the world. There were many teachers in grammar school who encouraged me to do artwork. I remember one nun in particular gave me a set of Prismacolors, which seemed like an exotic gift at the time because they were so much better than the dime store pencil colors. I wasn't exposed to very much artwork as a child, except for seeing reproductions of religious paintings in prayer missals, statuary, and Stations of the Cross in churches that I would go to.
You are known for your intricately detailed pop figurative paintings depicting musicians, writers, actors, for example, Prince, Madonna, Elvis, Emily Dickinson. Do you want the viewer to see these creative people in a different light, or is this a personal celebration of them as human beings?
I think it's more personal. It's more for me, because half the time they don't know who they are, or once you tell them, maybe they might know. But
you mean the viewer?
The viewer, yeah, the person who sees the paintings other than myself. And a lot of it came from reading a lot of biographies and realizing that the people you held in a really high regard because of the artistic gift they had had just as many problems, usually more problems than we do. So it's sort of like elevating them, but at the same time they're humanized. The older I get, the more that's what it's about.
Your palette is jewel-like and illuminating. Color is obviously a language for you. Yeah. Is it intuitive or a calculated act for you?
I did take, the design courses where you learn color, but I don't remember any of it. So I'm hoping maybe I assumed some of it. I think it's more intuitive now.
Looking closely at your paintings, I think of memory, reality, and dream. How much of your paintings are this?
A long time ago, I said that painting was like a means of travel and a destination at the same time. It is an escape, but it's like a condensed reaction or meditation sometimes on outer reality too, but it definitely is a created reality, a poetic reality. Sometimes when I do, say, a landscape, I want it to be heightened reality. When I perceive a little area of edge of the water planting, natural planting, and you just realize, well, you don't see this very often anymore. And I am sort of trying to create it. It looks magic, but that's because in real life it is pretty magical looking.
You don't travel globally. You don't fly on planes.
Hate to travel.
But your paintings look like you do.
I think I'm just really adept at trying to imagine what a place would be like and trying to go there via the painting.
In the painting, American Address, Irma Thomas is posing elegantly with mud on the bottom of her white cocktail pants in the middle of a swamp and is covered with furniture.
Yeah.
The swamp is covered with furniture.
Yeah.
What about this painting?
It was originally to be in a show, sort of a post-Katrina show. But Irma Thomas in the painting is, 20? And she's not that age anymore. So it doesn't make sense time-wise as a Hurricane Katrina painting. But it could be Hurricane Betsy. It could be another time. And that's why I was really specific with the plants. There are a lot of oak trees in it, swamp hibiscus and irises and that sort of thing. And there are a couple of little native birds in there, too.
Yeah, the painted bunting.
Yeah, painted bunting, yeah.
Sitting
which is
in
kind
an
of
empty,
a magic bird to me, yeah.
Sitting in an empty, open refrigerator. What's that about?
The refrigerator was such an indicator of the hurricane. You would just drive into the city and see all these refrigerators, and, people were making art out of them for a while. I've had a couple of paintings with refrigerators, and I sort of liked them anyway to draw. So it sort of made sense for me to have that in there. And then it's kind of also another reference to the hurricane without being really about it.
Well, what about the title of the painting, American Address?
Yeah, referring to, is this region part of America, regarding some of the treatment, assistance, and all that in the first few days after the storm. It's the same thing we always deal with here, to sort of have to beg to be included in the country sometimes. It's an ironic title.
A lot of, what inspires me to do a painting is sort of comes to me, I'll be driving around and, a song, a lyric might tip me off. It's almost like it comes to me. And when I sort of have the image in my head, I'll try to start doing research, gather the information. And now it's so much easier because of the internet, but it used to be that I would buy, fan magazines and, order posters or, buy a book just for one picture to use as the template for a painting. And emotionally, I think I do it because it's something in me. I can't fully explain it, but it satisfies a need to capture this sort of pleasure or fulfillment that the art of those singers or painters or whatever brings to me. And so it's sort of like a tribute, but at the same time, I try to make it not just fan art. I want it to kind of transcend that.
So I use a lot of photographic source material and try to make it my own. And it's in the sketch on the panel. I don't do preliminary drawings. I draw on the panel itself, and there's a lot of erasure, and the drawing is pretty detailed. It's almost like the painting, and there's not a lot of modeling because the pencil work, I might do that at first, but then I erase a lot of the shading, so I can it's sort of line drawing basically when it's done, and then I might draw in, say there's a fabric pattern. I don't draw the pattern of the fabric. I'll paint that in later, but the drawing itself might take me 2-3 weeks to do, and then it's all covered up by the paint. So sometimes I try to photograph it, sometimes I forget to document the drawings. And the paintings can take, the ones in this show on this wall, anywhere from, 2.5-3 months each to do. And some have taken longer, some have taken 4 months.
I guess, a lot of people will say their paintings are about this or about that, and I consider my paintings to be about time, and that my process mimics, or hopefully will let the viewer feel that the paintings are about time. And the process, because the process takes so much time, the process is about layering. It's kind of additive and subtractive. So I'm putting things on, taking things off. And not only does that take a lot of time, but hopefully the process will reveal the layers that have come before. Just like, when you're walking through the French Quarter, you'll see the colors of behind walls that the wall had been previously. So in my work, that involves a lot of layers of paper. And as you can see right here, I've collected a bunch of old posters, and I always have these collections of kind of debris going on, whether it's kind of, children's homework or, kind of images that I like. So it's images, fabric, all this kind of different, these different materials. I also mine images from art history. So a lot of my work will be stolen from other artists, and then I will erase it. And so you can see the layers underneath. Again, kind of hoping that I will gain access to your emotional world by using an image you're familiar with. It's like the kind of customs we have in our daily world, saying hello and how are you. It makes people comfortable and allows a kind of deeper conversation after you're comfortable with one another. So that's what I'm kind of hoping to do with the image on top, and by erasing it and having other things coming through, again, I'm saying there's a lot under that. It's not just about what's on the surface.
I'm Parks Anderson. I've worked for Dale for 25 years or more. The studio was 7 people when I started, and it's grown over the years. And Raven, I think, is nearly 15 years. And our role is to work on installations and help Dale translate his ideas and work to galleries and exhibitions and commissions. Several years ago, Dale did a series of black work. And what grew out of that is what we see here, which is work that really focuses on white. And he's followed through in a very disciplined way from his drawings to the Venetians to past soft cylinders, hard cylinders, and chandeliers.
Well, I'm Jondava Catron. My husband, the late Robert Colescott, was my partner and my friend. I'm happy to be here at the Arthur Roger Gallery, where we shared so many happy times and saw so much beautiful work, handsomely installed and professionally represented with great heart by Arthur Roger. This show, Troubled Goods, began in San Francisco at the Meridian Gallery and has since 2007 traveled. It's very fitting that its final place of exhibition would be here in New Orleans, since Robert's father and many of his ancestors were born right here in New Orleans.
I wrote this quote about the show, and especially the sort of the process of thinking about the show and making the show. The unique mashup culturally forming New Orleans was a gumbo of distinct flavors, all adding up to her particular song, a voice like no other voice. She is, at her core, relentlessly joyful and beautifully tragic. And the title of the show, Now She Sings, Now She Sobs, Now She Sings, comes from this particular quote. I left that Now She Sings on the end as a kind of an optimistic point in the show. I hybridized the title from a song by Chick Corea, Now He Sings, Now He Sobs, and used it to talk about the feeling about the show. The show is divided into 3 parts. The large piece on the wall has the name Now She Sings, Now She Sobs, Now She Sings. And this piece is a kind of distillation, impressionistic distillation of the history of New Orleans. And in New Orleans, the history is still present in everything and everywhere. And this piece was inspired by 2 particular pieces of history, or one that's very ubiquitous, which is the bars. And these bars, of course, all have these beautiful walls of bottles. And also inspiring this piece was the Apothecary Museum in New Orleans, which is an old apothecary shop that still exists from the 19th century.
Is there a source you like to refer to regarding the issue of beauty? I mean, where do you go?
I study it quite a bit, and the more I study it, the more I realize that it's infinite ideas behind it. There's no paragon of beauty. So for me, it's an endless sort of bucket of fun to look into, and I really am interested in what is beauty, what is the idea of beauty. But then it becomes something very personal. When something happens to have an energy, and I see that energy, that's what I call beauty.
Is that where the poetry lies?
Well, that's another one of those words, poetry.
Mm-hmm.
One man's poetry is another man's poison.
My name is Dawn DeDeaux, an artist born in New Orleans. The title of my show at Arthur Roger Gallery is Unseen. The fact that I'm taking an object that's supposed to be functional and turning it really by choice of material into something that's not functional really also takes on the issues of art itself. What function does it serve? And it's the poems, it's the metaphors, it's ultimately the great poetry in life. So it's unseen in terms of tangibility for some people, but very much at the core of human existence and human qualities. This series of work has been underway for a few years. It's the Mothership series, and what I have here in the exhibition are examples from Mothership 1, 2, and 3, which is in progress and still underway. Mothership is taken as a title to constitute Earth itself, or the possibility that we have to leave and maybe it is kind of the Led Zeppelin ship to take us out. The whole body of work, I guess, is inspired by two factors. One being a Louisiana gal, and particularly a coastal New Orleanian. We have perhaps had in the past a reputation for being a backwater place, but I would argue now that we are frontwater, at the really facing the battle line. We're at the front line of ecological issues and what to do about environmental issues that impact our future.
I would say that my work is about human beings and language. We are animals of words, and the potency of a word and an image linked together really describes us as human beings, because a word comes up, but it's accompanied with a feeling, an emotion, and very often with an image that links it. So we are language. We are language from the top of our heads to the bottom of our feet. We breathe it, we speak it, we sing it, we pray with it. We are completely language.
I'm James Drake. I want to thank Arthur for having me have another show here at the gallery. We've shown together in his gallery for maybe over 25 years and have really developed a relationship that I appreciate. For years, I always denied my infatuation with classical drawing and classical work, and this was sort of in the modern era or contemporary, a very verboten thing to do. And it would be old school, or you're just referring back to the past. And so I denied my intense love for that. So then later on, I thought, why should I deny something that I love? That doesn't even make sense to me or to anybody. But then I don't want to just do a rendition of something that's been done in the past. I want to make it my own and make it contemporary as well. And then I was thinking, well, what is more contemporary in our time than the real speed of science and the real speed of technology? Since the turn of the century, the 20th century, and that 100 years up to this point, there has been more advancement and more thinking intellectually, philosophically, and even emotionally in science in that 100 years, or 116 years, than there was prior in the entire history of the world. So I think it's important to, or for me was important to include quantum mechanics, quantum theory, with this classical love and fuse those two elements and see what happens.
Hello, my name is James Drake. Welcome to Santa Fe. I'm on my way to my studio over here, and I love passing by the roses, and I wanted to make this little video when the roses were really starting to bloom, and it brings me a lot of pleasure to have these and walk past them every day. So my studio's right over here. We'll walk down these steps. This is my daily occurrence. The studio is actually part of the house. It's attached to the house, so I don't have to drive a long distance or anything. But welcome to the studio. So I've got all my books, all my literature, everything I use to make art in here. This is where I spend the majority of my time all day, and sometimes all night. I'm working right now, and I started February 1st on this very large drawing. It's 12 feet by 24 feet, and it's in 3 panels. I started working on this February 1st when the lockdown actually started. And I think artists are always focused, and a lot of times they're alone by themselves. And so I wanted to really become completely and totally devoted to something during this lockdown that maybe exemplified focus, obsession, that type of thing. This drawing is paper mounted on canvas. Here you can see the canvas, but it's charcoal on paper.
I can't deny that there's spirituality in the work. Of course there is. I mean, I feel like every artist is doing that, but I'm definitely a part of it, because designing in its own sense is a kind of meditation. When you're creating a design, you're drawing the lines, and even if I'm doing it on the computer or doing it with a pencil and a compass, there's something about making that circle and then making the next decision and then making the next decision. And those decisions kind of does create kind of a trance in the process of the design.
Well, George, we just celebrated your 70th birthday, and this has been a wonderful exhibition. This show really culminates the past 3 major shows that you've done at this gallery in the last 14 years.
Right, 14, yeah. Well, yes, and the last 3, I've had this compulsion to talk about the things that I adore in art history, even though they may have been something I dodged in art history classes and such. But the Renaissance and different figure painting and different religiosity and such that kind of scared me away when I was in college. It was fun to go back to it after all those years. And of course I tap dance across it. I don't exactly dance with it, right? I mean, I tell my story in their eyes, or so to speak. In their language, I'm telling my story or something, but I'm usually putting portraiture into it, and different things that I know from life are pumped into those stories, right? But as you say, it's 3 years of me tap dancing back and looking at where I came from, or what was influencing me, even though I wouldn't admit back then that it was influencing me. But over a period of time, I've come to admit, right, that I was influenced by classical things.
You're known for drawing, painting, and photography. Is there a medium that speaks for you the most, or do you work with them all equally?
What it really is me drawing all the time. My brain instantly draws. I have a doctor friend who says that we have this thing, us, who draw well or draw automatically. We have this spot in our brain that's up on the right, halfway back. There's some little dot up there, which is the ability to draw in line. Now, how that comes out, I'll have to go find that doctor and find out what he was talking about. But it is interesting that there is an automatic line drawing in my head. I automatically could take some subject matter and put it into line.
This affects the photography as well.
Well, exactly. my cousin had an absolutely dumb little Canon camera or something. And so I posed everybody, and I'd try to figure out where to put them. I'd shoot a guy on the street or in the grocery store or something. And then I put him inside the window upstairs and took the clothes off. Because, first of all, the clothes were hideous in 1969.
This is how you got into photography.
Yes. And so I'd just pose the guy right inside the window, I'd talk to them. But always I would talk them into looking at me while I was going to photograph them. I cropped the pictures instantly in my brain. The camera had to be at such a distance that you cropped right through the middle of the thigh, and the fingers and the hands sat in the picture properly. If the picture was just a face looking at you, and say just even a chest, and the hands had to be in it, I would shoot it over and over again until I had the fingers and the hands all reading well in my head.
Who are these people? You know them all personally or intimately, or who are they?
I've almost always had to have a sort of a brain and or fingertip connection to the people. I like thinking that people that I really, really know.
And these people, did you work from memory or did they pose for you?
Both. There's about 5 guys who have posed for me regularly who just love to show up, and I grease them, and they just love being that anatomical, fabulous, bronzy-looking character.
Yeah, let's talk about the grease that you put on and everything that you do to prepare them for the photograph.
That was a sin I invented. I all of a sudden discovered that if I told a guy that he was going to be photographed at my house, I would frequently find that when he showed up, he had bathed himself to death. I wanted there to be a certain happy shine, a beautiful sexuality to them, and they would almost always show up too damn clean so that the camera wasn't getting anywhere. It dawned on me, you got to grease them. That's all it amounts to.
With what?
Vaseline.
And then what?
Plain old Vaseline.
You would grease their whole bodies.
Oh, yes.
Your figures seem to be on the verge of a dance or a waltz, a ballet.
Well, they're much more on the verge of a waltz, a dance, or a ballet than they are on the verge of sex. I mean, I don't seduce the people that are in front of the camera. I mean, they may be lovers of mine at different times, but not because I've shot the camera at them. In my photographs and in my paintings, except for 1 or 2 joke kind of pictures, there's no sex in the pictures. They're a nude person standing in front of the camera, so they're really talking to the camera as well as to George.
My work that I've been able to show here in this room right now is mostly work that has been done within the past 2 years, and I've been working on a couple different types of pieces that are more like these 2 over here, but then also there's a series of interactive work that I've been working on. And this flower over here, which is a night blooming cereus, it's called Sleepwalker. I have some in a series called Sleepwalker, which is the same flower. When you begin to move, it will start to open up some more. And it is a piece that I collaborated with my husband, David Sullivan. He writes code, so I've been experimenting with the possibilities of combining interactivity via code with video and seeing what can be done with that. This is kind of a very simple experiment, but my impetus for it was really quite a selfish and perverse one, I think, because I wanted to see these flowers open and close on my command. They're such amazing flowers, and they do open, it was always just so depressing to go outside in the morning and see them lying on the ground because they only open for a single night. And if you don't see them that night, then they're not going to reopen for you. They're spent, they've gone.
I'm Lin Emery. This is my studio in uptown New Orleans, where I devise and make my kinetic sculptures. I have another larger studio, which was a 1920s movie house, which has more space, but it had 5 feet of water, so I'm still restoring it. Meanwhile, I'm working on a number of different projects. I start out everything with just paper models, which you articulate. I don't draw at all. I articulate with pieces of straw. Then my assistants translate that into a working model. And then if you want to move back, this is going to be the actual model, completed work, which will be mirror polished like most of my work. This is a new piece that I'm calling Rondelet. It has 5 elements, like the 5 verses in a song, Rondelet. And we're just at the point of trying to find the balance for this group, these top 3. And this varying assembly has to be exactly pointed towards the center of gravity so that the whole thing moves well. There are many more ideas than there are times to make anything. This is probably a new piece I'm just playing with, but this is one we've just more or less finished. In one of my engineering books, I found this page on space mechanisms, and so I started playing with a model that would relate to these ideas, and laid it out with all these joints, and Abe has very beautifully realized it.
I'm Vernon Fisher, and I work out of Fort Worth, Texas. For one thing, I don't make a lot of work each year, so it's hard for me to mount a show unless I dip back into earlier work. And the other thing is I like to have a lot of different, just as individual works have a lot of different things that are going on, I like a show that I mount to have a lot of different things going on. By that I mean categorically different. In other words, there'll be a blackboard, there'll be maybe something that's sculptural, there'll be like these punctuation pieces, which solves a lot of problems for me because I have kind of a protean sensibility. I mean, for years I struggled with the idea of like settling on one thing to do.
And finally, I just gave up, you know. I mean, I just have all these things that I want to do, and they all seem to come from different personalities inside me, so I just go with it and whatever, live with it, I guess. Originally, the chalkboards turned up into my work as components of pieces that had multiple parts. And then along about the middle 80s, I started doing individual chalkboards. When you encounter a chalkboard when you think about when you first encountered chalkboards, it was usually in a schoolroom or maybe in a scientific lab or something like that. But you encounter it, it's already been used by somebody else, so it has the residue of other minds at work before you get to it. So it's already got that built into it. And then the other thing I like about it is that it looks vulnerable to being wiped out, erased, rubbed out. The idea that the chalk looks like it could disappear adds something to the work, I think.
I'm not religious, really, but I would say God, just because I don't have another name to like represent this force I feel like put me here. Because like I started to realize my life didn't really make sense, how like things have happened. I jumped around a lot as a kid. Then Hurricane Katrina, we moved, like we just lived in a trailer park for a while. I don't know, my life has just been all over the place, and somehow I'm like here. I just like can't explain it. I don't know, I have 5 younger siblings who I like think about a lot. It's like what's keeping me here at Yale most of the time. I like art. I don't know, I'm a person like any other person who's trying to like figure out how to like get through life. And then in high school, I like got into art, started to draw, started to paint. But I don't know, halfway through freshman year of college, or like after being here, I started to realize how like important it was to like have black faces in paintings. And it was something I didn't even realize like was important, or that my work was doing, or like was part of the appeal of the work. So I like continued and like painted more portraits. I got some of my cousins, I got some of my neighbors. And it's a series I'm still continuing. Partly to like kind of to have these kids painted and to just play around with color. Like people's skin are just like so fun to look at when you pay attention and think like a painter, because you don't just see like brown or like white. You see blues, purples, yellows, greens, oranges.
My name is Mitchell Gaudet, native New Orleanian, and I've been working glass for about 20 years now. I started doing glass just as a crazy idea to take an elective when I was getting a bachelor's in psychology at LSU. and really enjoyed the course I took there, and continued on to get my master's here at Tulane University in fine arts, focusing in on glass. So the last 20 years I've worked in glass, primarily cast glass, and I have a studio here in New Orleans, Studio Inferno, in which I do a line of production as well as produce, the artwork you see today. When I first started working in glass, I did stained glass and blowing and fusing and slumping, and I wasn't able to incorporate something that I really enjoy in making art, and that's my collection of found objects and collectibles and stuff. And as a kid, toys and things were very important to me. I still have a hoard of little things that I had as a child. I love going junking, I love going antiquing. One of my hobbies was digging old bottles and finding stuff. And when I discovered casting glass, I was finally able to incorporate that love and all of these objects into my work, and then use those like an artist would use paint, color to say stuff. I was able to use these objects to make work. So it suddenly became this fascination and this collecting idea as a vehicle then to do artwork. So casting, especially sand casting, liberated me to be able to tie all this together.
This is John Bullard, a dear friend of Robert Gordy and director of the New Orleans Museum of Art from 1973 to 2010. I had the pleasure of organizing a big retrospective of Bob's work in 1982. Robert Gordy was an immensely talented artist, steeped in art history, and he would achieve national acclaim fairly early in his career. But most importantly, with his late work, Bob would achieve a profoundly moving legacy of artistic accomplishment. In his final work, Bob expressed his deeply felt emotions with extraordinary courage as he created strangely beautiful images, often with excruciating human expressions. There was a quiet, awful finality in Bob's last profoundly powerful work. Robert Gordy died in 1986.
My work goes through so many different forms. You know, there's always this idea, it's a target that I'm trying to reach conceptually, but the style that I take it can change so many different times throughout a project that it doesn't look anything like, you know, my original drawings, but it's just, you know, going with instinct a lot and seeing where it ends up. And I try not to fight my instinct when I feel like it's right, but I don't know why. And then in the end, it usually comes around to a point where I'm just like, oh yeah, it was perfect. It's exactly what I wanted to say, you know, 6 months ago. I can't fight my inspiration. I feel like it comes so naturally that it's, you know, it's going to pull me in one direction, and if I deviate from it, it's like going to be wrong, sort of thing. You know, I can't force myself to be inspired, but what usually happens is while I'm working on a project, say with still lives or something like that, I'll have these other ideas that I want to include and realize that they're not going to work. So I kind of push them aside. But there's like a nagging at me. It's like, oh, you need to start working on this next thing or something like that. But I kind of just like put them in a box and wait till the next project. And then by the next project, I already have all these ideas that I need to fulfill and manifest.
Hello, I'm Simon Gunning, painter from New Orleans. I'm originally from Australia. I've lived here 30 years. And this is my second exhibition with Arthur. And this is based on Avery Island, which is an area about 70 miles southeast of here. It's a beautiful area. It's a combination of natural wildlife and manicured landscapes. And it's the home of the Avery hot sauce, the Tabasco sauce, but this show doesn't deal with any of that whatsoever. I was completely taken by the natural side of the island, the nature side. And the reason why I went with a much different direction with my work this year was because of our previous history. We're dealing with Katrina, and the show before that I dealt with the Gulf of Mexico, and that was hinting at a lot of the physical violence and nature, the force of nature. And then there was Katrina, which I painted for 2 years, and that was extremely depressing. So having worked through that body of work, I really wanted to do something refreshing and green, something cool and nice. And nature, I've always loved nature, painted nature and fish and birds and trees, and I'm basically a landscape painter. And I just thought, I'm ready to tackle nature straight on. This is my latest body of work. It's called Postcards from Plaquemines. Plaquemines Parish being southeast of here, it's a very lovely wild area where there is a lot of fishing and oil industry goes on. And I've been fishing and recording that area down there for a long time. And hopefully these images will give my viewers some idea of the process and the area of what it's like down there.
Hi, my name is Joseph Havel. I was making these pieces in right around 1993 or 92, where I decided that I would use clothing, and particularly men's white shirts, for sculptures, and I isolated components of the shirts and so forth. And when I was doing that, I'd be cutting all the labels out of the shirts, and I started to become intensely interested in the fact that you could tell pretty much every single thing about a piece of clothing, its whole history and the whole, let's say the socioeconomic class it was made for, the quality of craft. You basically tell it was the genetic material of the shirts, and so you had all of that in a label. So the earliest ones were actually made out of the labels that were cut out of the shirts. In 1996 or 97, I produced a label that had a word that I chose out of a book that had been a touchstone book for me in my formative years as an artist. And so that was the whole beginning of doing these labels. I went to the book, which was called The Dream Songs by John Berryman, which in many ways isn't important. And I went through and I found a word that, if it taken out, it would resonate in a completely different way, but it would be, for me, rooted in my memory. So I took out the word, which was the first label was present, and I sent it off to a manufacturer for labels and had a fancy shirt label made, a double woven label. I've had a dozen words made, and all but 2 have been from the same book. This is probably like one of these bigger label pieces is probably, let's see, probably about 35,000 labels. So it's the word said 35,000 times, muted, embedded back into a form. But in putting it back in is like dropping the memory back into the composition, and you get both the murmur of all those words and the physicalness of the material.
Basically, what this is about is there's been a conversation ongoing now for almost 30 years between the two of us concerning an idea of improvisation. And we have done this a couple of times in other places, and folk thought it was valuable and thought maybe we should do it again. So that's why we're here. What we're going to talk about tonight is just some ideas. And one of those ideas is improvisation. I think an awful lot of people think the idea of improvisation is something that is haphazard, accidental, and something more or less just thrown together. Well, it's a tremendous misunderstanding of what that's about. For one to improvise, especially if you use the idea of this music that's made New Orleans so famous, one has to first be a master of one's instrument. You also have to be have to understand the literature and know the music. And third, you have to be able to compose simultaneously while performing that music and listening to others and perform in sync with other people. So it's a pretty complex situation.
My name is Rick Powell, and I teach art history at Duke University. I first met John Scott in the mid to late 1970s. I remember coming to New Orleans for the College Art Association meetings, and we were whisked away, our group, to a restaurant called Dookie Chase. And at Dookie Chase, we met this tall artist, very gregarious, and that was the beginning of a friendship that lasted until Scott's death. I think the thing that most amazes me about John Scott, and it continues to amaze me, is that his work spreads across all sorts of boundaries and parameters. Scott was not only an amazing sculptor, he was an exceptional draftsman and colorist and calligrapher and raconteur. And I think that Catholic view of art and image making is exemplified in almost everything that he does. A piece like this that incorporates all the colors that it incorporates, has the parts that move and sway to the breezes, that evokes the sounds of jazz and children playing and the sounds of the city. When you see a piece like this and you know a little bit about this person, it all comes together for you. One really understands how a work like this would be connected to someone like John T. Scott. I remember coming to New Orleans in 2002, and there was an amazing exhibit up at the Arthur Roger Gallery of prints, black and white prints, large-scale prints, such as this one. And they were prints inspired by the urban landscape. And I remember being really moved and somewhat not confused, but very thoughtful and contemplative about what I was looking at. Very much like this print, they were images that were very dense, with all sorts of urban elements, signs, billboards, porch stoops, facades of buildings that seemed to be literally one on top of the other. And little did we know in 2003 that what we were looking at would become a physical, visceral reality in the entire city and region in 2005. And looking back at those works, and now looking at these incredible blocks that were the templates upon which the prints were created, you have to wonder, I mean, what was in Scott's head to have thought about the city, particularly New Orleans, in this apocalyptic, cataclysmic way 2 years before events actually transpired in the city. So and now looking back on that moment and on this body of work, I now know why I was so reverential in 2003 looking at these pieces, because clearly they contained in them, you know, something about the power of not only his artistry, but his vision at just what could potentially take place, and this sounds really surreal, but the horror and the beauty that might be contained in that spectacle.
Media is like language, and there really isn't any reason for a person not to speak many of them fluently. So that all of my mature life, I've always had an interest across the board in things, from printmaking to calligraphy to sculpture to painting, and to all kinds of esoteric things.
It's obvious that communication is really important to you. Education is really important to you. Is this why you became an educator?
I had no intentions of teaching, none. When I got out of graduate school, my mentors at Xavier asked me to come back and give at least a couple of years, you know, teach at the university for a couple of years as a role model and whatever. And I said, okay, I'll agree to do that. That was 37 years ago. What I found in the process of teaching was more of the process of learning. Because if you have to share information with someone, you have to understand the information you're trying to share.
John Scott's interest in teaching took him all over the country as a visiting artist. University of Maine, Michigan State, Arizona State, University of Georgia, but New Orleans remained home.
This is the only city I've ever been in anywhere in the world where if you listen, sidewalks speak to you. And to me, New Orleans is like Dracula's casket. I can travel anywhere, but I have to be here to be alive. Because a lot of my ideas are coming out of the culture of this city, coming out of the reality of this city, even though I deal with ideas that are related to global things, not local things. I find that the vocabulary that this place has created for me allows me to speak clearly, and I love it here.
What does New Orleans have that other places don't?
I think culture, but a lot of people take exception to that.
I'm Ted Kincaid, and this is Every Doubt That Holds You Here. And these are works that are printed as photographs and presented as photographs, but they are all, in fact, manufactured totally inside the computer. I always wanted to be a photographer, and both my undergraduate and graduate studies were in photography, in traditional photography. I studied photography before the advent of the digital revolution, and I grew up working in a darkroom and loved the smell of the chemistry and loved that look of a photograph. By approaching this work photographically, I actually could have done it as a painting or in another medium, but these images are from my imagination, and it's really important that I create a plausible universe to me out of nothing. And if I would have painted these images with paint, there would have been no conceptual point of people saying, why paint something old? Because a painter can create any sort of universe and not be challenged or questioned about it. But a photographer, there's always the element of, where was this? Where did this exist? And so approaching this work specifically with the medium of photography, because it's photography, and quoting the history of photography in it, allows the viewer the freedom to think that these images that are entirely manufactured could exist in some form or fashion.
Was it 2 years ago we had this panel? That question was the question of the evening. And I got up and said I just felt that I would paint the way I paint if I lived in Kalamazoo or Africa or you name it. And then after hearing everyone else's talk, I realized what my environment and the society in this city has meant to me as an artist. And then all of a sudden I realized there's jazz here, and there's color here all year round, and there are black people and there are pink people and all kinds of people with wonderful colored clothes. And I realized that I probably wouldn't be painting the way I am anyplace else. So it was a realization to me, and it was a wonderful evening for that one reason. In abstract art, we use the same means. We use color, form, planes, lines, values, as we do in painting nature. But we take something away and add something. We take away the recognizableness of objects, but we add a question, the unanswerable really in words. Now that's where I think abstract art's great contribution is. It can be so many different things, something different to each person who sees it. Some people have looked at my paintings that I'm doing now, which have many symbols in them, and have explained those symbols to me. And all I say, oh, is that what they are? Because I don't know what they are. And it's this mysteriousness, this uncertainty, this great big question that abstract art offers you that I think is very intriguing. Because you're the master of what you see in that abstract art. You can make it into anything you want. My husband came in one day when I was painting a painting. He said, Red, for the first time I know what you're painting. You're painting the roses.
Your husband said
My
that?
husband.
How long
And
have you been painting?
I was so furious. I said, oh, Hugh, I can't believe this. Well, I thought about that several days later. I think he was right. And I was completely unconscious of what I was taking from nature. To him, it was a row of roses, and he liked it for that reason. I'm terribly prolific. I work 7 days a week. I don't think I have too much more time to do it, but I've been doing it for 40 years just that way. Now, nobody has made me do that. And I don't need to do it to feed myself or my family. So it must be inner directed. I've got to admit, it's lovely when someone comes along and says, I love your work and I want to own it. I have to be truthful about that. It gives me a wonderful feeling, but I don't work to get that feeling. I work to get that most remarkable, maybe 10 minutes a week when you're not really painting the painting, the painting's painting itself.
My name is Gene Koss. I'm a sculptor, and the name of the piece is called Line Fence. This piece is roughly around 26 feet long, and I think around about 7 feet high at the back and 5 feet high at the front of the piece. A lot of people won't know how it's put together, and I like those kinds of things. I like the idea of not telling everybody how I fabricated those, how they got fabricated. But I think at the end, how they actually fit together formally, I think that's also very important from the top to the bottom. I think this piece is maybe 3.5 tons. I've got to keep myself in tip-top shape to make these pieces now at 62 or 3, whatever I am. But whatever it takes on these, we'd like to do them. I work with a team, orchestrate a team, which is totally different in the fabrication of the other pieces. A team has to, I can't do my work alone anymore in a way that kind of bothers me. But I think I'm pretty good about working with a team and pulling them off. When I teach, I tell students the most important thing is what you do as an artist is the drawing book, the sketchbook. So they came from drawings. I draw constantly, and these came from drawings to then a maquette. But I wanted to change a whole lot on this particular new series, and it had because of the idea.
When I lived in North Carolina, I would travel up and down the same road, which was this very rural area near the Outer Banks, and I would just travel it, and when I would see someone that I thought was interesting in some way, I would stop and get out and ask if I could take a photograph, and a lot of times those contacts would develop into friendships. As far as the final image goes, there's and I'm paraphrasing, but Andre Breton said something to the effect that a portrait should not be an image that's examined, but rather an oracle to be questioned or consulted. And I think that some of these images, and certainly my favorite images by other photographers, have that quality. You don't know exactly what you're looking at, you don't know exactly what it means, but you're transfixed, and it's touching you on some subconscious level.
Well, in 1982, the Times-Picayune decided to revive their Dixie magazine, which had been around for, I guess, 100 years. And so Jeanette Hardy was going to be the new editor of Dixie magazine, and said, we're thinking about doing your cartoon in the Times-Picayune. And it was kind of a shock to me because a few years before I'd gone to Charles Ferguson, the editor, and he said, your cartoons will never appear in this magazine, this newspaper. So finally, Jeanette called me one day and said they were going to let me do the cartoon, so I did it. And of course, the characters are Vic and Natalie Broussard. They live in the 9th Ward where they have a po' boy's shop / bar room. And their motto is seafood, cocktails, and conviviality. A lot of people always ask me, what does conviviality mean? But it's like Miss Conviviality at a beauty pageant. It's like, that's what New Orleans is all about, being convivial, right? And jolly, and having a good time. Every day I draw, people ask me that. I have to draw. It's my religion and my addiction, really. And if I don't draw, I feel bad. I haven't drawn in about 8 weeks now, and I feel really strange, because the whole process is all that matters to me.
C'est pas quelque chose qui t'est venu à l'esprit. Mais moi t'ai gagné envie pour écrire poème, tu connais. Moi t'ai commencé à écrire plus au début. C'était un bon moyen pour faire quelque chose de créatif. C'est sûr.
You can't stop. Might stop a little while. You're gonna pick it back up. You're gonna pick the needle back up. Greetings, how y'all doing? Checking in with the gallery. This is Big T, DeMar Melanson. Checking in from the Bywater. My glass is fogging up from the mask, but just checking in. This is my morning walk. I take a walk, as always, quiet in the morning around here. Nobody walking, nobody moving. And I'm just, every morning I always think about the healthcare workers, and I try to send some kind of love to all the people that's working on the front lines. Yeah, this is my walk every day in the bywater in the morning time. Love and blessings to all. This is some of my new works I just did. This is a Harriet Tubman piece I just beaded. This is a mask I just beaded, an African mask. It's probably gonna be, I know it's gonna be at Arthur Rogers, so you'll probably see this in October at the shows. This is a piece I beaded called Lava Love. Right after Mardi Gras, I did all of this stuff. Yeah, they shut the city down, and I just went crazy on the beadwork. This is a piece I draw. This is my great-great-grandmother and her man at the time. So this is a piece that I'm gonna be putting in the show in October. This is a piece I'm doing now. Yeah. Hey, look, this is my studio. This is where all the work's going on. That's where I get crazy with it. This is another piece that I just finished. Basquiat. I love it. This is my studio. This is where all the works go down. If you look around the walls, I'm inspired by everything that I've been having all my life. I'm inspired by Haile Selassie, Hajar Rastafari, and everything else. Inspired by Virgil Abloh. I had to change my calendar. That's my Charles White calendar. So yeah, I'm just excited about what's gonna come out of this pandemic thing. I try to make the good out of everything that's bad all my life. It's been, a struggle for all of us all the time throughout all these things that's happening in New Orleans since I was a little kid. So yeah, we learn how to make, like Beyonce say, lemonade out of lemons. Yeah. My creation this year. Got to wear it for Mardi Gras. This is a suit I call Job Defender. We made it out for Mardi Gras, and that's it. So this is to me, it's a historical suit. And, because it's only been worn one time. It's my brother Aki Becker, Midnight, a reggae artist. He passed last year, and I thought I would, pay him homage in my suit. So yeah, it's a suit dedicated to, the Nyabingi Rastafari. So thought I would show y'all this. The significance of it is, man, we only wore it one time, and I'm hoping, we would have got to wear it again, but I don't think so. So I'm hoping I could bring this by Arthur Rogers and let it go on display one day. So y'all have a blessing. It's the Big Chief suit.
Inspiration comes from everywhere and other artists, like the Venus piece. Imagine covering up an aardvark in beetle wings, so it looks like he's wearing an armor suit.
I paint a lot out here on the prairie, in southwest Louisiana, which is a rice-growing region. And for me personally, it's a very dramatic landscape. A lot of people see it as being simply flat and so forth, but what you get is changing, dramatic skies. You get all sorts of exciting changes of sky. And there's something about the whole ambiance of this place that has kind of got me. I think also Louisiana in general, the culture of Louisiana is really unique. It really is rich, and especially again the southern part of the state is almost the whole story of the state is the fact it's the mouth of the Mississippi River, and you've got so many different people who come here, and it's such a rich culture. And I'm always saying that so much of what I love about Louisiana is all bound up with this backwardness, and it seems like that so much that we love about Louisiana is somehow tied in with the fact that people live in a way that doesn't always do them a lot of good. It sometimes gets them in trouble. But there's a spontaneity and there's a earthiness and a kind of a joy in life that happens. And I think there's a wholeness about the way people live down here that I enjoy personally. I mean, you know, mainly among the Acadian people where I live. They work very hard, but they do know how to let go and enjoy themselves as well, and I like the balance, you know. My father was a well-known Louisiana photographer who died in 1966. You know, he traveled the state a lot, and he did a lot of work at the Louisiana Forestry Commission, Louisiana Forestry Association, and that gave me an opportunity to go all sorts of places in Louisiana that had not been photographed very extensively. They certainly weren't on the tourist trails, you know, but he did his best to make art out of his assignments that he had, and I think often succeeded. And so I had the picture of someone who had a family and supported his family and still managed to, you know, go around and look and see things. And he did a lot of work that wasn't on assignment. He just kept his eyes open. And I traveled with him on a number of trips, and I think I kind of got a feeling for doing that as well, and a love of Louisiana as well from him. I was born and raised here, and so that starts off being something that's kind of in my bones, I guess, you know, and I think a lot of people could feel that way about a lot of places. So, but going beyond the fact that it's, you know, I grew up outdoors a lot when I was a kid, and I was out in nature a lot. I guess I got a sort of a early dose of nature in Louisiana, and especially South Louisiana, and just never quite got over it. So I think a lot of what my work is all about now is stemming from my childhood on a family farm and out in contact with nature. And I have found that painting outdoors like this, on this prairie, I've become very conscious of the horizon, and I honestly feel like I can almost feel the curvature of the earth out here, you know, and it's an odd experience. It makes you kind of almost imagine the rest of the planet from this one little slice. And I find it, like peripheral vision, I find myself, my view kind of falls off on both sides, and it seems almost very natural to make shapes that are more encompassing, kind of like parentheses, and that would taper it off on the end and wrap around, you know, and accentuate that particular feeling you have about the landscape. I think art is very important to people. I really think, if you look at just the history of man, people have been making graven images and drawing images for maybe as much as 30, 40,000 years. We're keep pushing the cave discoveries farther and farther back. And they've been making images since almost, maybe before, certainly before they could write, it would appear. And it looks like it's inborn in human beings to want to make images and make forms. And I think it's a very necessary part of our existence. It's one major way of expressing our humanness. I think if you stop and look at it, art is one of man's distinguishing activities, and no animals make it as far as I know. And we do this, and it's an impractical activity by and large. You know, you won't generally put food you won't directly put food in your stomach or protect you from your enemies or put clothes on your back. And yet people persist in doing it. And I mean, we know that's true. And so there's a real need to do it. It's not just a sort of a relaxing hobby for everyone. It's really, for some people, they absolutely have to do it. I honestly don't think I could get along without doing it. I really think I'd be I just wouldn't be able to function very well if I weren't trying to do it, you know. And it's just some kind of need to do it. I found that out when I was pretty young and as an adult, and I just finally realized I better settle down for the long haul.
When I was in college, I just fell in love with tried all the materials, and then I finally got to granite. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, and I actually chose it because it was the most challenging. When I was in Italy, after apprenticing for Luis Jimenez for a year, I went up to the quarry and worked in Pietrasanta, where Michelangelo used to work and live, and fell in love with the way that they tear the stone out of the mountain, because they drill these holes and drive these wedges in there, and they literally tear it out, and then we get they would get the stone down, and all the artists were rounding off the corners and basically making the same thing, just rounding it off and making it pretty. And I liked the process when they were tearing it out. I loved that it was rough and you could see the process where they drill the holes and then it was around nature. You know, it was still connected to the mountain. Man had touched it, and so I still think of the work, trying to relate it to where it comes from, not taking that away, taking that away.
I think my work has always had a compulsive nature to it. One of the things that I started doing after Katrina was I started knitting, and that's kind of a domestic craft. And as I was knitting in this sort of meditative state, I found that I kept wondering how I could sort of make this part of my work. And then I realized that it really was in a lot of ways, because I always have gravitated toward pattern, and I always have done things that have been fairly compulsive in the way that I make the work. And so the lace pieces, the stencil pieces were started out that way, where they were very compulsive cutting and patterns that were meticulous. And when I moved into doing the keepsake pieces, I have a printmaking background. My MFA is in printmaking. So I was very excited about being able to start sort of exploring that idea of taking something that I had an object that I could photograph, and sometimes I would print on glass and sometimes I would print on paper, and I could layer them and put them together and play with how they overlapped each other. And to me, that was part of the fun, was really sort of creating these compositions within a composition.
You currently work in painting, drawing, and sculpture. Is there a medium you actually prefer to work in?
It kind of depends on what I'm doing at the time. I find that I'm really grateful for knowing all the different things that I do, because if I have an idea that means that it has to be sculptural, then I'm glad to be able to know how to do that. But if I have an idea that I want to have sort of a sense of layering, like printmaking can give me, then I really like having that knowledge. So I pretty much choose the media that best suits the idea.
The importance of drawing is obvious in your work, and some art institutions rely less on drawing these days. Is drawing important for art making?
Oh, I think so. I think it's the basis. Even at NOCA, when we have students, the first year is totally devoted to drawing, and toward the end they get to start experimenting with paint. But until you really can understand how to look at something and put it down on paper, then you can't really do anything else with it.
My name is Francis Pave, and the title of the exhibition is 200, Art Inspired by 200 Years of Statehood. I'm not only a Cajun, but I'm other things at large. I'm a Acadiana artist, I'm a Louisiana artist, I'm an American artist, North American artist. I live and exist with these people that make, Cajun food and make Cajun music. So I think, and I listen to that. Of course, I experience that all the time. It's a given for me. It's something I take for granted. So I think it seeps into my work because I'm just living the experience.
The work that you see in this room, in this exhibition, is rather unusual for me. I started this kind of work probably like a year ago, 1.5 years ago. Before that, I focused on light installations, mostly like very large-scale architectural work. And then, so this whole, out of those little experiments, a whole group of work started to manifest itself.
So my name is Alec Soth, and I'm a photographer from Minneapolis, and I'm here on the occasion of my first show in New Orleans at the Arthur Roger Gallery. I've actually shown this body of work, Sleeping by the Mississippi, a number of times around the world, but I've never shown it really along the river. I always had this intention to show it in St. Louis and on and on, but this is for me is a big occasion to show the work in New Orleans. I was coming to the gallery yesterday and was walking down the street here and saw this image, and it felt so good. It's like coming back home to me. This is the first project that I did that sort of made my name in the art world and whatnot. And this particular image I have such a strong feeling for. It was made really close by in the French Quarter at outside of a church. And as it turns out, when I left the gallery yesterday, I walked by that very same location. And it's just these memories came flooding back of that experience of making these pictures. They were made between 1999 and 2002, and I wasn't a name in the art world at all, and I was totally wide open to whatever experience I could encounter. I was driving along the Mississippi River, not photographing the river itself, but just those things that caught my eye and whatnot. This picture was made on Ash Wednesday, day after Mardi Gras. And, you know, Mardi Gras was a big experience for me as a northerner, sort of an experience of a different kind of culture. Then I woke up late the next morning and stumbled into town and had this idea of photographing people with the ashes on their heads. And I approached this woman, and she said to me, well, I'll let you take a picture if you buy me a can of beer. And this seemed contrary to the Ash Wednesday sort of lifestyle. And so I said, well, you know, maybe, but what's the deal here? And she told me, oh, these ashes, they're just cigarette ashes. Funny story, I was photographing just a year and a half ago in Austin, Texas at a commune, and she had just been there. So, and that's the nature of my photography, is that it's all about serendipity. It's all about one thing stumbling into another thing and into another thing. And the goal for me is to keep that kind of openness and that kind of floating quality. And that's particularly what this work, Sleeping by the Mississippi, is about, is wandering and floating and surfing and letting the flow of the river take you wherever it goes.
Being an artist is not a job. It's a way of looking at the world and reacting to the world. And it doesn't stop at 5 o'clock when I go home, or 7 o'clock, or whatever it is. It's a way of, for me, expressing how I feel about the world around me. And it is constant. We all have a style. Anytime an artist, you know, puts her life to it, she develops a style, a habit of making marks, developing a language, a visual language, using colors in a certain way that is not like any other person who uses color in that same way. And it's a matter over time. I'm a gestural painter. I don't stay in the lines. I don't have a plan beforehand that I work from. I take hundreds of photographs and I do sketches and I do a lot of collages. But then when I face that white canvas, it's a mystery, and it's a frightening blank stare that I make. And I start in. My first job is to mess up that white canvas, and that's where I start. Most of the work is done on the floor. I bend over. I stand and bend over, and that gets tiring, but it also is enervating because I work around the painting. I don't start with top being top. That also comes out of the process. So my goal is to allow the materials to paint the painting, and I just want to step away. And through that process, and through the experimentation and trying new things, I'm hoping to come up with new imagery.
Before we talk about your new work, let's talk about the old work. You're known for rephotographing images from Hollywood films and TV, not necessarily the best films.
Well, all kinds of films. I think I try to take images from films off the TV screen and then re-edit them with other images to form new narratives that have nothing to do with the original images or the movies that they came from.
But are they telling a story? Are these social commentary?
Well, social commentary sounds a little highbrow for me. Basically, I'm trying to have you look at something differently. I think the difference is you see a movie and you look at artwork. I think or the other way around. I'm not sure which, but they're different. You can take 1 second from a film and it's very unremarkable, and if you seize it and take it away and put it in a completely different context and with another still from another movie, it can alter the whole thing, and then you have to look at it in a different way rather than see it.
What compelled you in the first place to reuse film imagery?
Well, I collect contemporary art. I'm an art hag. And so basically I needed one shot from one of my films that I did not have a still from. So I thought, well, I wonder if I could just take it off the TV screen. I blundered into it like I've blundered into everything else in my life. And it came out in a weird, arty way, very different than what I wanted. So I realized I wanted to be like a failed publicist for every movie and take the stills that no one remembered. Because basically, when people remember films, I'm convinced it's the still they remember that was on the poster after many, many years, not the movie itself.
I'm standing in front of just one of my bench of resources. All of this junk here is responsible for my work in the last 30 to 40 years. I like things that are bent up and crushed, and a lot of my work is based on, again, cut fencing. I cut the fence and then I bend it into configurations that, for some reason or other, I happen to like. And then, on tracing paper, with a black magic marker, I do drawings, and then I superimpose one drawing on top of another drawing. You can see the variety of forms and compositions that I can get. This one here, I'm moving more into a more geometric phase, which I'm in right now.
Hello, this is Rob Wynn at my studio here in New York City, giving a brief little glimpse of various things that I've been working on to deal with my concentration to help get through this crisis that we all find ourselves in. Thank goodness I have my work, my studio practice. It's been really interesting to work without so many assistants, because my practice involves a lot of technical assistance. And so here in the studio, I have the ability to really work quietly, just trying to give you guys an overview. I'm also very fortunately having a monograph published about my work. So that's why you're seeing so many different materials here: bronze, glass, thread, felt, ink. That's the back of my studio there, my storage. You might like to see this wall of images. So going to leave you with this little view into my life here. Wish you all the best. Stay strong and stay safe. Bye for now.
Sometimes the hardest places to photograph well are the most spectacular places. They are so spectacular, but in that there lies the problem. What are you going to do when you get there? What are you going to do with one still photograph? Arriving at the final frontier, wherever it is, can sometimes lead to something of a brain freeze. It really is so visually intoxicating that for you to interpret it in a way that embodies your character and your traits is quite a challenge, because you're almost screen struck by what you're seeing in front of you. And that's why probably in a year I only take 4 or 5 pictures that I think get above that threshold, get above that bar. That is the challenge, that is the epicenter of my job. I cannot be held responsible for what the final frontier looks like. My responsibility lies in the interpretation of that. And I'm an artist rather than necessarily a wildlife photographer, so anything that hints a degree of interpretation, I think, is a handy bedfellow for me. Henri Matisse said it took him 30 years to find out that his favorite color was rich black. I very much accord with that. You could argue that there aren't many better places in the world to extol the virtues of monochrome than the polar regions. And if you fail, and we quite often fail, it's going to be because of me, not because of the destination. The more disappointments you have, the more your determination to fight. I guess I'm a fighter. Good photographs tend to have 2 or 3 common features. Number one is that they can be looked at for a long time. They probably can never be taken again. And somewhere in the image, there is something that tugs on the heart. And of those 3 things, the one that's normally the most elusive is the last one. All that matters is whether the final print stacks up, whether it's strong enough to elicit an emotional reaction. You can't really tell an awful lot from the back of your camera. It's when it's a big print, the size of a pool table or more. That is the moment we can look back with a great deal of satisfaction.